Hi guys, Anthony
Hello.
and Kate here. This is episode 11 of the All Things Esoteric podcast. Today we're going to talk about Pluto and DAATH. But first, Kate's astral update.
Well, hello, Anthony. Nice talking with you earlier.
Hi.
Before we got on. It's good
As
to
always.
be with you. Yeah. Like we talked about, guys, we really feel these energies, and it's no exception with this podcast. And so if this podcast tends to take a more serious tone tonight, there's a reason for it. Pluto is doing its magic globally at 26 degrees in Capricorn, 57 minutes during this Aquarius New Moon today. So I want to say hello, Aquarius New Moon. Welcome those that have joined in the celebrations of the new moon and that energy. I welcome it in because we need it to understand what Pluto's trying to do here. If you're in Eastern Standard Time, that new moon occurred February 1st, 2022 at 12:46 a.m. New York, New York. So it occurred many, many hours ago, but we're going to be feeling the effects of this new moon for the next several weeks till we get into the next full moon. I wanted to share something on that tonight from the Mountain Astrologer, which I highly recommend if anybody's a serious student and wants to get in deeper and really understand our times and past times and just different types of astrology that's out there. Just so you know, there's so much more than just Western. There's many different ways to read the stars. They all, I think, come back with the same message, but we're all different, right? So we all have different approaches to things, and I'm very grateful for the new things that I'm learning through the Mountain Astrologer. So they're not paying me to say that, but I highly recommend it if you're interested to subscribe. But this is by Diana McMahon. I apologize if I mispronounced it, Diana Collis. And she's an astrologer, and I thought what she wrote was so profound on the new moon. So I'm going to go ahead and share this. This is not my information. This comes from the Mountain Astrologer, Aquarius New Moon, January 31st to February 1st, 2022 article. The Aquarius New Moon urges us to find people we resonate with or notice the differences among those around us. Since this sign has dual rulership by Saturn and Uranus, we can feel both a part of a group and separate from it. Saturn binds us to social mores and traditional ways of going through life, some of which can work well and others less so. This has been more pronounced lately with the new moon squaring Uranus and separating from a sextile with Chiron, the wounded healer. We can feel thrown off kilter when out of step with whatever the perceived norm is that surrounds us. Yet, this process can present something of an illusion. Perhaps we imagine how others will react if we break from expectations. But with the moon applying to conjunct Saturn, we may sense a strong push to be part of something. And I think that really encapsulated it in how this new moon wants to show up, did show up, and will be with us for the next several weeks. So our intentions, I think it's a cry for authenticity, and to really stand up and be like, okay, a lot has occurred in the last couple years since, I don't even want to say the name of it and bring it any more glory, but since this craziness started out there with this disease. And it shifted and it changed so many things that I think a lot of it not only shifted how we work, but it also shifted our social groups. I think for some, if you look back on the new moons and the full moons, it's been a real development of personal relationships and knowing who you are and where you fit in and who your tribe should be and who you will no longer associate with, where you see that certain friendships or relationships have served a very good part in your life and it's time to move on, or some have not been healthy, and this is where Pluto is trying to drive the message home in Capricorn, next to Mercury conjunct at 24 degrees, and then Venus now separated on the other side. We have Pluto communicating from a distance through Mercury to Venus. They're all in the same sign. And then we have Mars in Capricorn as well at 5 degrees. So we see this, the inner planets are always pretty close anyway, but we see them lined up like they're trying to communicate a certain message. And you need to look for yourselves where this 12-degree Aquarian new moon shows up in your own chart, and that's going to be where you're really going to have a deeper understanding of personally how does this new moon energy want to work with you. So I do want to say there's a really big blessing in the stars today, and we have Neptune and Jupiter, who are the signs of Pisces in the 4th house. So we have a mutable water house, excuse me, a mutable water sign in a cardinal Cancer house. So it's water on water. So there could be a lot of tears in homes. And this occurred to me today. I had a transit hit exact on this new moon, and it was my sun up in the 9th house was opposite the exact degree of Pluto, opposite Capricorn. And so anyone who knows opposites, they're 180 degrees apart. They're not really communicating. They're run by the nature of Saturn. Whenever you have an opposite, it's a challenge, and it's a Saturnian challenge. It's something that it's not going to go away for a while until you learn. Saturn never releases until you learn. So it's contrast and effort and stress and passional attraction and reaction, and it's just this slow hammering. That's the way I see it, much like Pluto. So I have my very sun, my ego, in the 9th opposite, in the 3rd of Gemini, communications from the 9th of Sagittarius, long-distance travel, communications. I have a real transit occurring here, and anyone who's gone through it, you probably know, yikes, it's not easy. But I have other areas of my chart that are bringing aid and help, and I've chosen to look to those and spent time connecting with Source and meditating today, and keep continually bringing myself to center. And I got to tell you, that's the only way you can get through some of these transits, when you're working with these energies and they're active and you know what's trying to take place. It becomes a beautiful story that unfolds before your eyes. And we're meant to interact with our charts. I believe that strongly. We're meant to know them and not be kind of overly caught up in them, but we're meant to know what's going on in the bigger themes, especially the outer planets. It's imperative, because those move very, very slowly, and not only do you come in with these slower moving planets, you have peers that it's really important to understand they're your tribe, so to speak. Because when we start talking about Pluto here in a moment, you're going to see Pluto stays in a house a very, very long time. It takes 248 years roughly. Pluto does not go around, the star does not go around the solar system the way the other planets do. Its orbit is very irregular. I'm going to go ahead and dive in to, after going over that new moon, I hope you check it out. There's so much more there, but I'm going to go in and dive into Wikipedia here tonight. And if you want to join me, I'm going directly off of Wikipedia on some of this. I watched the Pluto New Horizon documentary, and I highly recommend anyone who wants to know what's going on with Pluto to go watch that documentary. What a phenomenal voyage that was. It took 9 years for new horizon to reach Pluto. So what I want to say, too, before I get started is Pluto does have a heart-shaped glacier on top of it. A heart-shaped glacier. So no matter how hard and troublesome and how deep Pluto can go into your psyche, I want you to know, hold on to this truth. It is not for naught. There is a reason.
Pluto does connect with love. We will end on love tonight, actually.
Yes, but first, Hades. Yes?
Yes, that's what it takes.
That is what it takes. Don't you know it? I'm so glad I can feel. I have, my Saturn returns almost here too, so I've got that going on in the same house. This is crazy. A caterpillar that's dissolving. That's what's happening. And that doesn't feel good at all. I don't like it at all. All right, but that's what's happening. I think there's any stopping it. Okay, Pluto, minor planet designation. We'll talk about that in a minute. We'll get to this, how it was designated a planet and then removed from its status, and all of the astrology people went, no, we don't care. Scorpio's like, I don't even really care because I know it's real. I am a Scorpio ascendant, so hey, to all the Scorpio ascendants out there. All right, so it's a dwarf planet in the Kuiper belt. You know where the Kuiper belt is?
Yes, basically it's an asteroid belt beyond Pluto, basically. Well, you just said Pluto's in it. I've always heard that Pluto was right before the Kuiper belt, but maybe they figured otherwise.
Well, it's a ring of bodies beyond the orbit of Neptune. It was the first and the largest Kuiper belt object to be discovered. So Pluto was discovered by Clyde W. Tombaugh, Lowell University, February 18th, 1930. After Pluto was discovered, it was declared to be the 9th planet from the Sun. Isn't it interesting how I'm attracted to 8 and 9? We talk about this, Anthony, certain numbers. And Neptune's the 8th planet. I have Neptune on my ascendant. And Pluto's the 9th planet. And I have Pluto in the 10th, in a very significant spot. It's like I came in to talk about those two planets.
Also, 9, the moon is attributed to the 9th sphere on the Tree of Life, Yesod, and I know you have a strong moon placement. And then 8 is the 8th sphere, Hod, Mercury.
Oh, yeah, well, Cancers. I'm Cancer, and I have a Cancer moon, Cancer Sun, Cancer moon. Scorpio ascendant, so I got grand water trines in my chart. So I operate very heavily in the intuitive types of work. It can be too much water, though. We all know that. I'm doing videos on that right now, starting to talk about water in a chart and how if you come in with too much of an element and not enough of another, you can have an imbalance there. And it's a great way to just see where you need to be more grounded and grow. And often what you're lowest in your chart as far as your element of the 4 is normally where your biggest struggle is. So, it's interesting, huh?
Oh, yeah. I was reading about recently different alchemical and Vedic diets. Basically, the Hindus have a system where they know, like, say, if you have too much... They break it down into 3 categories instead of 4, but basically if you're too hot, they give you cold foods. If you're too wet, they give you dry foods. Like,
correct.
They figured out how to balance out your elements through your diet.
This is true, and Chinese medicine does that as well.
Yes.
They look at your breath. They look at like sour and sweet, all of that. That's Indian too. I haven't learned that super deep, but there's something to it.
And the alchemists knew about it in the West too, but it was much more secretive.
Yes. Okay, so beginning in the 1990s, its status as a planet was questioned following the discovery of several objects of similar size in the Kuiper Belt and the scattered disk, including the dwarf planet Eris. So I really want to get into some of the asteroids. We need to do that at some point, because I think that they're noteworthy, some of them. The more popular ones, and as we evolve, we're seeing them come to the forefront on their own and producing themes that I think they want to be heard. This led the International Astronomical Union, the IAU, in 2006 to formally define the term planet, excluding Pluto and reclassifying it as a dwarf planet. So they just don't think it's just due to size. Pluto is the 9th largest and 10th most massive known object directly orbiting the Sun. So it's not very big. It's half the size of the United States. It's 1,400 miles across.
Wow.
So yeah, it's not large at all. And it's made of rock and ice, and I tell you guys, go watch this documentary. It has mountains of ice volcanoes that are active. Shoots ice out, so we know that there's heat in its core. But because it's so cold, it shoots out and it immediately turns to ice mountains.
Wow.
It has 5 known moons: Charon, 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 the largest, with a diameter just over half that of Pluto. Styx, Nix, Kerberos, and Hydra are the other moons. Is that where Styx, the band, got their
No,
their name?
Probably the river Styx in Greek mythology.
Ah, yes. Okay, got you. What else did I want to say? Go watch The Flyby of New Horizons. It's just phenomenal. Really, really good to take a look at that. But it is extremely, extremely, extremely cold planet. So with that, I want to move on to the mythology. And this is off Mythopedia, some of the stuff. I want to give credit to that site. It's really good, guys. Go in and check it out. It's got all of the asteroids and mythological gods and Roman gods. It's pretty cool. So Pluto was a mysterious Roman god of the dead and lord of the underworld. The Greek Hades, the unseen Hades, also known, also called Pluto or Pluton, the wealthy one, or the giver of wealth. And the reason that is, I think, is if you, where Pluto is in your chart, is one of the longest themes, well, it is the longest theme of planets that you'll experience. And so it's very important to watch the Plutonian transits and aspects, which are those trines, sextiles, squares, opposites. Those are very important. When you have an aspect with another planet or astrological signature, it matters. And this is where we see things occur in life at certain moments, in how we can kind of know what kind of energies are going to be around at a certain time. And as you learn the archetypical energies of each planet, you can begin to work with them. And as you work with them, you begin to understand that it's just energy. And it becomes very personal. God of the underworld was Hades. He was the son of the Titans Cronus and Rhea, and brother of the deities Zeus, Poseidon, Demeter, which you said was Vesta, right?
Yep.
Hera and Hestia. Pluto was the mysterious Roman god of the dead and lord of the underworld, sharing his realm with his stolen bride Proserpina. He also ruled over ores and precious stones and was known as the bringer of wealth. And again, I think that's because once you get through what Pluto wants to teach you, you transmute your pain into power. That is alchemy. Take your pain and you transmute it into power. That is alchemy. And go ahead.
I was going to say the two things I thought of, where you just said he was the god of precious metals and stones, and that's in the ground, the underworld, and also what we're going to get to a little later on about Pluto being death and its relation to DAATH and the death, the rebirth experience, the true wealth.
Yes, that's exactly it. But it lay deep, very deep, and you must go to the shadow. And Carl Jung talked about this. I'm paraphrasing. If you don't make the unconscious conscious, you'll call it fate. It's shadow work. It's going in and saying, I'm willing to look at the parts of me that I know need transformation so that I can become more enlightened for me. This is what it means for me now. I'm not saying it has to mean this for you. I'm just a door. But although today was one of the most difficult days of my entire life, with this transit, man, it was real. It's passing now. I can feel it. And I staged, and I've continued to balance. But I want to tell you, when Pluto's done, it'll utterly transform you and transmute you if you allow it. If you allow it. But Hades, within a chart, is awareness, magic, the past, lower vibration expression that can be poverty, deceit, and the actual word garbage came out in some of my studies. In Mythology.com, he says, or she, a figure of enormous dread and terrible might, Pluto dispelled luck and controlled the fates of all mortals. As commander of the subterranean realms, he was the master of ores, metals, and the precious stones found within them. For this reason, he was celebrated by many as the bringer of wealth. Pluto was the Roman counterpart to Hades, the Greek deity who ruled the underworld of the same name. The crystallization of Pluto's identity as the Roman god of the dead, the underworld, and wealth reflected a complex historical development. Pluto's identity was largely comprised of elements taken from two distant entities, Hades, a Greek deity, and Plotin, the lord of wealth. The latter was a Dispater, a deity worshipped by early Romans for his power over the underworld and mineral wealth. In some mythographic and historiographic traditions, the name Dispater was used in lieu of the name Pluto. Evidence suggests that the Romans used these identifiers, interchangeably. So the etymology is the name Pluto, rendered as Pluto in the Latin, was derived from the Greek name Pluton, meaning the wealthy one. So, it doesn't feel that way when you're going down and getting all muddy and digging and, you're tired and you just want to rest and it's dark. That's the other thing. There's no light here when you're going down. The only light is what you bring with you on your forehead as you're, beaming it out of your third eye. And you're going through this.
And trap door at the bottom of the abyss that leads back to the top.
This is correct. So, he had a dog with 3 heads named Cerberus. Thought that was pretty cool. There's a Dutch engraving. Y'all want to check it out on Mythopedia.com under Pluto. And there's a picture of him here, and he's driving a chariot, and he's got a dog with 3 heads. And he's petting them and floating around. What he's doing. If he's underneath ground, I don't know what he's doing. It looks like he's up in the air. Oh, he's in a chariot. He's probably underground in a chariot, man. But anyway, his parents were Ops, goddess of the earth, and Saturn, ruler of the cosmos. So, his father was Saturn. Can we talk about that? That's a rough gig.
Interesting. If you've had some Capricorn-y parents, you might know of this.
Listen, Pluto's in Capricorn opposite my sun. And then I'm having my Saturn return. There's no getting away from this. It's what I wrote in that poem. the beginning when we were talking. There's no getting away from this transit. There's no getting away because Pluto takes a very long time. So this transit I'm experiencing, he moves and then he decides to stall out, and it looks like he's going back, and in the degree chart we turn him back and hits me again, and then goes forward and then hits me again and goes. It's like the wave hitting the shore, like Neptune, and when we pull everything back, you're able to see everything under the skirts, everything under that was deep, deep, deep down below. So with that, you can check Hades out in your chart. It's actually an asteroid you can plot. And I wanted to hone in on that a minute and talk about this because I think it's important. There's some things that need to be understood about Pluto that have to do with mastery and enlightenment. And so it very much has to do with Scorpio, which rules the 8th house, which is a fixed water sign. So it's important to understand what kind of things Pluto is interested in changing and what it's all about. So this is death, rebirth, sex. It's the higher octave of Mars. Now, Mars is also Scorpio's planet. So we have some very potent energy here that something to imagine it would be relentless bombing in a war, just hammering a city and hammering a city and hammering a city with all the full power of the god of war's planet, right? Mars. So this is the breakdown of psychological blocks that prevent evolutionary growth. Depth interactions with others leading to growth. Regeneration, deep change. Transmutation, that's imperative. We talked about pain into power. It's taking the wounds, see where your Chiron is in your chart, wounded healer, the things you need to be restored in and healed, so to speak, and then elevate and use it to help service to the world so that we can all heal one another, so that we are interchangeably healing one another, so that we can eradicate the destructive use of medications, wink wink, drugs that are being prescribed to people and ruining their lives. That's Pluto being a little upset about what's going on our planet and how it needs to stop and how it needs to change and how we need to stop drugging our children and how we need to understand what happens when we place precious children in our lives through that miraculous conception. When we come together, we deliberately want them and we place them in our lives to inject them with chemicals that their bodies aren't even ready for. I'm not advocating completely nothing, but what we've come to is not healthy, and we need to step back and really take a look at how medicine is harming and not helping. And somebody needs to talk about it. It needs to be said, because I've seen it and I'm studying it over and over, the misuse of opioids and the misuse of overprescribing. And it's ended up affecting a whole generation of our youth. Are you tracking me? And
oh yeah, I was one of them.
We need them. We need them healthy. We need their minds alert so they can receive what's coming in and not be all foggy. And we need them to know who they are. so they can pursue what makes their hearts come alive and not what people tell them to do. So when we think of Scorpio, there's a saying, it's the phoenix rising from the ashes. So Scorpio brings the ashes. Mars helps and brings the burn that brings the ashes. And you can stay a scorpion, you can rise and be an eagle, or you can be a dove. These are the three forms that the Scorpio takes. Scorpion, eagle, or dove. And it rules the regenerative faculties of cells and the reproductive organs. So this is a very potent energy found that works with Scorpio and Pluto. And it's procreative energy, not only to produce children, but to produce ideas. And so that's a whole nother topic. Sexual alchemy, not in a pornographic way. Sexual alchemy in a healthy way where you refrain and then you can use that energy. Of course, Aleister Crowley used it in other ways as well, if you know anything about him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't talk down on those ways. I mean, some people are more for the conserving route, and some people are more for the expending route. There are magical uses of each route. That's basically the left-hand path versus the right-hand path.
Yes. As long as everyone is consensual and you're an adult, I have no problem with that. But I haven't always heard that. Sometimes that's the way it goes down. In being a Scorpio, I dig into things, and I've dug into a lot of stuff, probably that the average person hasn't read, and some of it can get really wacky. Anyway, you're right. To each its own. As long as we're harming no one, I'm good. It's when people start getting harmed. Mastery and enlightenment, but not in the areas that perhaps we think to look. Pluto represents the underworld, the unconscious. So it is the shadow. It's the things in us that we don't see, that we need to, so we can grow and evolve. And oftentimes it is the things so deeply hidden from us that it takes someone else to bring them out. Have you had this experience?
I'm sorry, what was that? You cut out for a second.
Yeah, sometimes things can be so deeply hidden and in the unconscious that it takes another person to bring them out, or a friend, a loved one. They act as your mirrors.
Maybe when I was very young, but after a certain age, this is kind of why I never vibed with any psychologists, therapists, talk therapists. They could only tell me shit I already knew. I'm perfectly capable of analyzing the shit out of myself. I've done that my entire life, but I guess a lot of people need someone else to do that for them. When I was young, certain immature personality traits, growing up that needed to be pointed out. Yeah, that's part of growing up.
And that would be your approach. That's totally would be the approach you would take. See, I have more of the approach of water, and you have more of the approach of air to these things. And my experience has been to have to just work through these things, and things that were blind to me that other people had to tell me, and that wasn't always easy. And then that's how you grow. For you, your mind works that way. You know what I mean? I think you have Virgo. Virgo can be very critical, right? I don't want to say critical really, but you allow yourself to go in and look. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Mercury and Virgo, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
Gotta look at every idea.
Yeah.
And I do not
and
give
you
a
stay
fuck.
On it, man.
And I don't give a fuck about the public's ideas. I do not respect the general public's opinion at all.
Yeah, see, and that's so refreshing you're a true Aquarian. That's your Uranus at 0 degree, right? That's exactly what that is, and that's refreshing because we need new. You know, we need some things to go. I think that there's a lot good that's there, but I think that we're going to see some major changes and shifts, especially when we see Pluto go into Aquarius. Right now, it's still in Capricorn, and it's going to be there for the next couple years because it goes retrograde. And then it goes forward, and goes retrograde, and it goes forward. So, all right, this is interesting. Pluto in the astrological chart is involved with the grand water trine considered the nature of spirit and the fixed cross nature of the human being. So there's 3 water elements, and then there's 3 fixed, earth elements.
You mean signs?
Signs, excuse me, thank you. In the earth element. This is the way I meant to say that. But in the water trine energies, this includes the 4th house of Cancer, which is cardinal water, the 8th house of Scorpio, which is fixed water, transmutation, and the 12th house of Pisces, mutable water, the house of transcendence. So, yeah, you have cardinal water, then fixed, and then that's where Scorpio comes in the fixed. But he's also in the fixed cross nature, correlated to sacred creative powers, this stay-to-it energy of the fixed quality. So Pluto shows up in 2 different dynamics there. And Pluto, when you hear Pluto in astrology and esoteric teachings, it has to do with the soul and soul evolution. Like, when you see Pluto in your chart, it's highly connected to why you came in. There's other portions and other pieces that reveal that, but there's something to do with destiny with Pluto upon you. And the area in your psyche and in your shadow that you need to grow the most. And where your challenges will be, because I want to talk about this really quick. When Pluto goes through the chart, again, it's 248 years, but it could stay in a house between 14 or 30 years is how that works out. So the aspects can last several years, some of them. And a book by April Ellen Kent talks about Pluto, and she says this: every astrologer's favorite keyword for Pluto seems to be transformation. But I consider that a euphemism, a consolation prize for enduring Pluto's transits. Oh, it'll be great. You'll be transformed. But who among us asks the universe for transformation? We want money and sex and acclaim. It is not inaccurate to say we're transformed by Pluto's transits. It's just a tad incomplete. That's because humans are fairly stubborn creatures, and it generally takes some fairly dramatic life experiences to lead us kicking and screaming toward personal evolution. We'd like the ends, but the means can be daunting. And she goes on to talk about Maya Angelou, who was born with the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter all in close aspect to Pluto.
Oh, fuck. So, didn't she write the Why Does the Caged Bird Sing?
Yes.
One of the symbols of DAATH, which we're going to get into in a little bit, is the condemned cell.
Oh, wow. Well, Pluto knew a little something about transformation. During her 86 years on the planet, she transformed herself into an acclaimed poet, author, civil rights activist, and one of the world's most admired women. But that's not the whole story. There was her parents' divorce, her sexual assault at the hands of her mother's boyfriend at the age of 8. There was the perpetrator's murder after Angelou had identified him for the crime. There was agonizing guilt as she blamed herself and for his death. There were 5 silent years when she stopped speaking, lest others die. On the road to her eventual career, Angelou married several times, bore a beloved child, and worked at various times as a calypso singer, a prostitute, a madame, a dancer, and the first black woman cable car conductor in San Francisco. She had fascinating and devastating stories. 68, with transiting Pluto opposed her natal Mercury, the planet of storytellers. She was offered an opportunity to tell them. Suffering a deep depression following the murder of her friend, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., Angelou resisted at first, but when her memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, was published the following year, it launched a brilliant literary career. More importantly, it demonstrated that the girl who had once feared the power of her voice was now in full command of her own story. Her distinctive work and her self-possession inspired others for the next 45 years. Pluto's transiting aspects are not for the faint of heart. Sometimes bad things happen. Sometimes it's just a blue period. Other times, fantastic success presents itself. Fearing what Pluto might bring is unproductive. It's better to focus on what Pluto wants from you, which is always, and above all, honesty. Pluto's transits reveal what we're made of, good and bad. They give us no choice but to become more than we thought we could be, stronger, braver, more candid, more authentic versions of ourselves. Pluto will stand for nothing less. So it really gives you, that was such a great way that she explained that I had to read it, but it really gives you an example of what Pluto tries to do. And you remember, it's really in its transit for a very, very long time. So getting ready, as we've talked about, to go into Aquarius. So what the lessons of Pluto and Capricorn were started in 2008. So we could go back and we could look at the things that occurred. I know that we had shifts in our government and in big business. We've seen a lot of changes, and that is definitely something in Capricorn that Pluto has been interested in. We've had financial collapses in there, and we've also had a lot of exposure of government secrecy and spying. The U.S. Supreme Court decision that granted corporations the right of unlimited political campaign contributions, and a widespread distrust of government and corporations. So that's really been what we've been experiencing.
Nothing changed, though. Everyone's asleep or doesn't care or convinced there's nothing they can do about it.
I think it is changing, though. I think what's going to happen is it's going to have to change because of what's going on. We have had some really horrific events take place today, and I don't want to go into it and into the chart, but a school shooting. We had, what else do we have? There were a couple other things, and I'm sorry they elude me right now because I'm in Pluto, but we're seeing a lot of changes going down, and I think that as Pluto makes its return into the United States chart very, very soon, I think we're going to see some significant changes regarding our financial system. It's not sustainable. We have to make some changes. There's some cycles that I wanted to talk about that are characterized by awareness and acceptance of reality that Pluto will make, and they serve as catalysts to themes of loss, illness, emotional suffering, dramatic shifts in societal paradigms. So these are Pluto sextile natal Pluto, and that happens at about age 25. And so I'm not going to go into what that transit is, but know that it's important. The next one is the square, and that's in your mid-30s and mid-40s, and this is kind of where people have their moments in life where either they make it or they break it. I know people think maybe it's 30 when Saturn has its return that you're kind of like, okay, set in life. But I think it happens later where You're in your life after 30. Maybe you bought your house. Maybe you partnered up. Maybe you got 3 or 4 kids. I don't know what you've decided to do. Maybe you're working way too much and you're not happy, or you've not dealt with things. And so when you get 40, this is where you can walk away. And the square is no joke. It's between mid-30s and mid-40s. And this is the opening shot fired in the battle of middle life. And sometimes there are devastating external events that bring about a crisis and a heightened awareness of mortality. The death of an elder, the end of a marriage, a serious illness, a child leaving the nest. For some, the Pluto square rolls in like dark, wet fog that saps the color and energy out of life. It's hard to get out of bed. Everything seems pointless, and a dull depression sets in. So Pluto squares can bring about just this heaviness and fog about you. It can cast a cold, fishy eye at our youthful dreams, ideals, and ambitions, and decide we've been fools to think any of it meant anything. It's a grim, difficult rite of passage that often leads people to do foolish things, to prove to themselves they're still alive. So this is like they go out and they buy the red sports car, and they go out and have the affairs, or they, go out and spend a ton of money and get into severe debt for just the thrill. Eventually the transit passes, the clouds part, and the sun begins to shine again, but there will always be a little scar where the shrapnel entered. Then you go on to the trine, which is in your 50s, and then Pluto opposed natal Pluto happens after 50, and it's different in each chart, of course. These could change, but this is when you're at the point in your life where you don't care what anybody thinks about you. You've completely just become who you are, and you're comfortable in your skin, and you've evolved. And if you look at your progress chart, that's where you're going. Progress chart shows you how to get to where you're going. The natal chart is great. It's your blueprint. It's like your foundation in the home you're going to build. You must have a blueprint, but we don't stay there. We grow, and we change, and we evolve. And what's important is we know that we're not alone, and we have helpers to do that. So they're planets. And not only that, we have a ton of other aspects that are there, which are your sextiles and your trines, which are the energies that are working with you. And you can see how if you start focusing on that other energy, that things will move forward. So a word about Scorpio. I'll hand this on over to you, and then after that I'd like to get into the tarot a little bit about, and you're probably going to hit that anyway, but I'll piggyback on you. But Scorpio energy is that unconscious avoidance in our fears, and what we reject, and what we suppress, and what is taboo. And it's the great deep misunderstanding of what we do not know. So we're naturally afraid of the dark, and we can project fear into the conscious. That is why we have had this false understanding of Scorpio and its darker elements, that we correlate to demons, devils, witches, anything to do with witchcraft. Halloween falls in Scorpio season. So how do we approach what we do not know, and how to approach a planet so far away and so deep into the underworld? We must look at where our own darkness lay and make it conscious. Make our darkness conscious. And Pluto is about showing you your shadow, and the shadow to expose and transmute, not to shame or reject. So personal power to grow pushes us beyond our limits and personal limitations, continual metamorphosis, unending change, understanding change, accepting change. It's all necessary for our soul evolution. So it's fixed waters. It's going to stay, and make sure that when you're going through these transits, you're really taking some time for yourself and getting out in that sun. Really important to get out in that sun and get out in nature and ground yourself. Because if you don't, you can become really overwhelmed. And I know for me today, it was like I just couldn't do anything, man. The energies are so powerful. And when I went and looked really close at my chart and the transits, I realized that I just heard, look, this is just one of those times you just got to sit. You just got to sit in the cave. You just got to sit down there. And it's like I know I'm not alone, because Hecate or Hecate, however you want to pronounce her name, came in on my son at the same degree. So I felt that, even as concerned and foggish, and Neptune opposite Uranus didn't help, and all the other little things going on. I had a sense that something's at work here. Something very, very deep is operating in a very primal way, and it's hitting my fears and anxieties, and it's hitting my losses and my sadness, and it's hitting these things that are deep rooted in me that needed to be addressed. And I hope that doesn't make me sound like I'm a psycho.
No,
because I'm not. It's just I've had some deep dynamic changes in interpersonal in my life, and it is all making to me now. It didn't earlier, but the more that I've talked about this energy and gotten into Pluto, I can feel it strengthen me and be like, this isn't for naught, Kate. This is going somewhere, and it's going to be beautiful, and you are beautiful, and everything's fine right now. Like, the other thing that I know, and I'll hand this over to you, is that critical nature in Virgo. My progressed planets, I have all my inner planets except for one in Virgo right now. So I'm evolving through Virgo. I'm learning through Virgo's energy, but it can be very critical, and it can go really in on itself. So I feel like I'm supposed to share Virgos out there, and anyone in Virgo energy, please go easier on yourself and go easier on others, because you can't heal what you reject and criticize and are too hard on. And I I can be guilty of that. So I'm trying to be more balanced in all of that. And
that helps a lot.
I will hand that over to you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, the sphere on the Tree of Life, or not on the Tree of Life in this case, that we're going to talk about this week, that corresponds to Pluto, I believe. And with the past two planets, I should point out that we are beyond the classical planets. Only the classical planets are attributed to the spheres on the Tree of Life. However, with the discovery of these three, people have been putting them wherever they think they should go. And this is where I think they should go. So, Pluto in DAATH, the sphere that is not a sphere, or the 11th sphere. Its symbols, also, its title is knowledge. Its symbols: the empty room, the condemned cell, the prison, a high mountain peak, the grain of corn. Spiritual experience, vision of the abyss. DAATH is the realm of the abyss. Its virtues: detachment, perfection of justice in the application. Oh, by the way, this is from the Mystical Kabbalah by Dion Fortune, as always. Virtues: detachment, perfection of justice, and the application of the virtues untainted by considerations of the personality. Confidence in the future. Vice: doubt of the future, apathy, inertia, cowardice, fear of the future, pride leading to isolation and disintegration. And it's curious, she doesn't elaborate on this next point, but she says the star attributed to DAATH is Sirius, and she doesn't attribute a star to any other sphere, and she doesn't elaborate on it in this chapter, but it is kind of obvious. DAATH, the sphere of death, and there are many mythologies where Sirius is where your soul goes after you die. So, this is what Dion Fortune has to say about DAATH. DAATH may be considered as the point of unity in which all knowledge is contained. Being unity, It necessarily contains a synthesis of law, justice, and equilibrium. DAATH represents the unification of all on the tree of life. And here we get DAATH is knowledge. It is the child of Shakma, which is wisdom, and Binah, which is understanding. Now here, I might have mentioned this analogy once before, but I'll remind you. Wisdom is like knowing that the formula of E equals mc squared, right? Understanding is knowing that E equals energy, M equals mass, C is the speed of light, and how to multiply and how to do algebra to isolate those things. And knowledge is knowing how to do something useful with it. It's the synthesis of the wisdom and understanding, the masculine and the feminine. Right, the child, Mercury, is hermaphroditic, although not attributed to DAATH, although he does go in and out of the underworld. Anyway, continuing. This quote from Dion Fortune. She says, "Thus are past and future synthesized in the present, and this is DAATH. The abyss is a symbolic indication of the difference in the mode of functioning of the spirit through Kether, Shakma, and Binah, focused through DAATH, and the mode of functioning through the Sephiroth below the abyss. Above the abyss, the spirit functions through states from which emerge the qualities of love, wisdom, and strength. Below the abyss, the spirit's functioning is conditioned through sensations, emotions, feelings, and the mind, through which man reproduces the spiritual qualities of love, wisdom, and strength, tinged and distorted by the deviations and lack of development, as well as enriched by the growth of man." And we're going to get a little more into the abyss, because essentially the abyss is one and the same with the underworld. And the linking key is psychedelics, so I'm going to get to that in a little bit. So continuing, explaining on the empty room symbology. The quote is, "The empty room could be said to be empty in terms of the mind in that it does not contain forms, but it is not empty in terms of consciousness. It is concerned with states and attitudes and the experiencing of qualities. In faith and the many harmonics of it is the power to bridge the gap between the tools of consciousness and function used by the spirit below the abyss and the causative core of creative beingness of the spirit. Symbolized on the tree as being above the abyss, it is not a matter of being in a different place or environment, but a different state. Man has within himself all the qualities he needs. He does not need to develop them. What he has to do is to create and demonstrate the necessary states for their growth and flowering." It's about you have everything within yourself. Just know thyself.
Yes.
So there is a secret path on the Tree of Life. As we know, it consists of 10 spheres and 22 paths. However, there is an extra sphere, which we're talking about now, DAATH, and an extra path considered secret, as it is described. And this is what is said about that path. The condemned cell may be visualized as a cell in any prison or monastery in which the inmate is alone. A simple bed and a simple chair are all the furniture in it. There is a small barred window set rather high up in the wall. This window can be looked through only by reaching upwards and drawing oneself up by the strength of the arms, and this contains symbolism also. If by that strength the inmate draws himself up so that he can look through the bars in the window, he sees a courtyard, and beyond it a scaffold shaped like pylon gateway. Beyond, again, on the far horizon, is a brightness. As he looks to that brightness, it is as though he were drawn towards it, giving the impression that the brightness approaches rather nearer to him. And as he is drawn to that light, and the light is drawn to him, there is a fusion. And this is exactly what you were talking about with the shadow work, trying to draw yourself up from the darkness towards the light.
Mm-hmm.
She continues, the best way to understand this path is by analogy with the experiences of the soul on the desert path. On that path, the soul learns how to be alone, how to develop its own vertical contacts, to be dependent upon nothing save those contacts with the evolutionary personality, and through them with the hierarchy on the inner planes. In order to understand those things, the incarnatory personality goes through a very strict and astringent discipline when it seems that all things needed by the incarnatory personality are withdrawn from it, until, by virtue of its contacts, it learns to be dependent on no outside thing at all. So it's the ultimate self-reliance.
Wow.
You're a whole...
read that last sentence again.
In order to understand those things, the incarnatory personality goes through a very strict and astringent discipline when it seems that all things needed by the incarnatory personality are withdrawn from it, until, by virtue of its contacts, it learns to be dependent on no outside thing at all.
See, that's it, and it's knowing that you're enough. And here's the challenge: we're not taught that yet. I think it's changing, but we're not taught to go in. We're taught to get on our knees and pray up and out, which I think is already in. Like, there's already this connection there. I don't think you need to go look for it. I think it's already, the Christ himself said the kingdom of heaven is within you, and this was before he died.
Right. One of the most scandalous things the Gnostics were trying to teach is that God is within you, and you don't need the priest or the church or anything else.
Right. Or, whatever you attribute source as. There's a connection there. There's no doubt about it. Okay, thank you.
Right. And I swear, it's just going to turn around a bit. No more dreariness. It gets better, I swear. On the path to DAATH, now she was just describing the path from DAATH. On the path to DAATH, all these processes are reversed, and the soul goes forth from the condemned cell to learn, not how to be alone, but how to be one with all life. And now this is where I'm going to transition to a different book with a slightly different topic. I mentioned before, the link is psychedelics. In the book, The Immortality Key by Brian C. Muraresku, he makes his case, his thoroughly researched and, in my opinion, ironclad case, that the mysteries at the ancient Greek temple of Eleusis, where people would come from all across Greece, sometimes all across the region, very far away, to come and take part in this ritual where they would drink a potion and they would have these visions, and they would go into the underworld, and afterwards they described feeling this rebirth experience. So here's some quotes from The Immortality Key. Under the visionary spell of the Kukion, which is this potion I just mentioned, Persephone is thought to have revealed the mystery of death and rebirth directly to the initiates. That's why Demeter set up the mysteries of Eleusis in the first place, so Persephone could establish a personal relationship with each of the pilgrims. According to Ruck, they would meet her face to face in that liminal space between this life and the next, convinced that they had been given access to the true nature of reality. In the underworld that had invaded Demeter's temple, they would witness Persephone give birth to a holy child. Now already we have these similarities to a psychedelic experience. Mm-hmm. There's another book called Lsd Psychotherapy by Dr. Stanislav Grof. Amazing book. Where
that sounds amazing. I need to get that.
He details in clinical terms his experiences giving LSD to hundreds of patients, hundreds, maybe thousands of times, where he describes this certain phenomenon, this certain type of experience that it's not dependent on a dose, really. But it comes to you when it comes to you, and he describes it as you're reliving your birth experience, and he describes 4 distinct stages, and the second of them is this abyss underworld stage, where basically the 4 stages are: the first stage, you're comfortably at one with the mother and everything is fantastic, you're one with the universe. And the second stage is called the no exit stage, where the uterine contractions start but the birth canal is not yet open. This is where people in their psychedelic experience, they, for no rational reason, feel like that they are going to die, that they are dying, that death is inevitable, and they can...
Not funny.
It happens, and they freak out, and they're worried that they're never going to be the same again, and it's just complete the depths of fear you could ever go. And there are often nightmarish visions where their eyes close or eyes open, and this is the abyss, this is the underworld, it's all the same. And there's another quote, from ancient historian, I'm not sure if he's a historian, I forget exactly who he was, but ancient important person, Pretextus, declares that he was talking about a short-sighted law when the rituals at Eleusis were outlawed. He says this short-sighted law would make the life of the Greeks unlivable. Eleusis is the one place that holds the human race together. And continuing with some modern quotes from people after psychedelic experiments, quote, across the board, volunteers in the Hopkins and NYU psychedelic experiments report becoming better versions of themselves, more open, more compassionate, more forgiving, more loving, bathed in God's love. Quote, atheist Dina Baser was finally able to appreciate and connect with people on a profound level for the first time in her life. When we spoke, she described falling in love with her family all over again. But it wasn't an indulgent, self-obsessed New Ager that exited psilocybin session, someone on the narcissistic hunt for her personal happiness and well-being. It was a socially conscious Dina who felt an innate sense of belonging as a fully fledged member of the human tribe, passionately concerned about the future of the planet that her grandchildren's generation will inherit. And this is exactly the type of feelings people walked away from the Temple of Eleusis with. And this essentially, everyone should go read The Immortality Key by Brian C. Muraresku.
We should put all that in our description. I'll do that. That is.
He doesn't need our help. These are bestseller already, but definitely.
No, I mean, people can check it out,
Of course.
What else you got? That's amazing.
Essentially, I'm going to get into LSD psychotherapy a little bit more when we do psychedelics, but I just wanted to draw that connection in people's mind, or the abyss, the underworld. If you've had this psychedelic experience of death and rebirth, you've been to the underworld, you've been to the abyss, right? So, and the end result, the heart on Pluto, the end result is love. No matter how much of a hellish experience it is, the end result is what you need.
Absolutely. Remember that heart shape on Pluto whenever you think, like you said, like you think it's just like, no way, man. Just remember that's the end. That's what this is all about, is taking the long trip and being willing to go all the way out there and take a look at that heart. And by the time you make it out there, by the time you go deep down, you'll be resurrected, which is what Pluto represents in the major arcana tarot, is judgment. And the Tarot of the Spirit by Pamela Eakins, PhD, calls it the resurrection, which is basically the same thing.
Now that is pretty good, because the virtue is the perfection of justice.
Right.
And also, when I was reading, when the Greek belief was when they do go down into the underworld, there are judges that send you to different parts of the underworld, depending on what kind of person you were.
How about that? Where have you read that?
It was just some general readings around it's not something I pulled. It was just one of the many things I saw when I was doing research for the episode.
Okay. Yeah, something that's interesting, too, going back to the birth thing, is I have read that the spirit, the soul, doesn't actually come into the human body until there's a hole on the top of the scalp on a baby that's opened. And I can't remember the name of it.
Is that why there's the
soft
top
spot
of the skull? Yeah, the soft spot.
The soft spot. And then eventually, by the time I think they're 3 or 4 months old, that closes completely. You have to be really careful until then.
So you're saying newborn infants don't have souls?
I read that spirit no, it comes in, but it isn't sealed completely until that soft spot closes, and then there's no leaving. Until then, you can leave.
Oh shit! So don't drop them.
Or you can choose, like, I don't want to be here. I changed my mind.
Huh.
Apparently,
interesting.
Yeah. But number 20, resurrection. I'd like to read the divinatory meaning here out of this book, unless you were sharing something else. So I don't want to.
No, that was perfect.
Well, thank you for that, and I'm really curious to hear what you think of this here. But she says, your personal perceptions and consciousness shall dissolve to be replaced by the deepest understanding possible. You are in the final stage of knowledge, and you have known it. You are about to be resurrected into new thinking, into completely new stage. It is as if you are entering a new aeon or cycle in the grand scheme of your life. Let this happen naturally and beautifully. Do not fear change. You have earned the right to ascend. You have earned your rewards. You deserve every good thing that is happening to you. And I thought that was so beautiful, because when I heard, just my spirit leapt when she said, you've earned your rewards, it's like whenever Pluto is doing whatever it's doing, however it's doing it, it knows where you're at. There's an intelligence at work here. It's a smart energy that reads you and understands you in ways, I liken it, really, to be honest, to like the Holy Spirit, in that it's just so penetrating. It's just so knowing of who you are and what is needed in your life. And the element here is fire,
right?
Associated, and that's energy that's assertive, right?
Right. I do like that is a good attribution, Pluto, for judgment, because originally its traditional association is fire, and in the Thoth deck, judgment is actually replaced by the Aeon of. That's actually just called the Aeon, but Horus is pictured, and it's meant to imply the Aeon of Horus, and Horus is the child, and we just talked before how DAATH is the child. Is wisdom, is knowledge, child of wisdom and understanding. So the Aeon card, which replaces judgment, is also about the close of one chapter and the beginning of a new chapter. But the extra piece is that new chapter is about the Aeon of Horus. It's about the crowned and conquering child. It's not about worshiping the masculine or the feminine, but the result of their union.
I got you. The symbology on the judgment card, resurrection card, in the Smith Waite is profound to me. Obviously you have the angel, and anywhere, anytime you see an angel in his tarot, this is a divine message, right? This is a message to be received from divine above, and also your own subconscious in your dreams during meditation. This is wanting to bring out the hidden things inside of us, and the angel comes, the guide comes to say, hey, I'm gonna care for you. I'm gonna help you take what I'm about to send you and bring the highest good to you. The highest good. And there's a flag in this card which represents the announcement of something, right? This arrival of something, and it's a red cross. And there's a trumpet. So there's important message. Whenever we hear a trumpet, it grabs our attention, and it's important, and we need to listen. There's an urgency to this card. I think that's why they give it fire. And there's nudity in this card, which can represent sexuality, but it's a symbol of being receptive and open to the spirit realm. Wherever you see nudity, you're wide open to the messages that are coming in. And of course, we talked about it reducing to two. Do you want to talk about the duality there with two? I'm sure you know a little bit about it.
Well, what do you mean exactly? There's a lot to go with that. 20
reduces to a 2. We always bring it down to a common denominator. So 2 is really the theme. You don't think of balance when you think of Pluto. You don't think of 2.
Well, I mean, if the result after you go through the horrific Pluto experience is bliss and love, I mean, it ends up being balanced. It's just an extreme way to get there.
Right. It brings in the dualities. It brings in the light and the dark, and the yin and the yang. And saying, look, it can't always all be light.
Right. To me, the spirits and deities that make the most sense to me, ironically, are the contradictory ones. Right? Because if you can't have birth without death, they might as well both come from the same source.
If you can't have birth without death, they might as well come from the same source.
Right, that's the divine feminine. That's Babylon. That's why, the feminine is the death as well as, obviously they give birth.
Mm-hmm. You'll have to elaborate on that more.
Well, think about it. If nothing can be born unless there's room for it, if nothing can be born unless the old things die.
Okay.
Right, okay. And life and death essentially come from the same place. Remember their Hermetic law, the extremes meet.
Right.
So that's why contradictory goddesses like Babylon make so much sense to me.
I got you. Thanks for explaining that. Now I'm there. All right. Whoops, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something?
No, you can continue.
She talks about esoteric qualities in here, and I wanted to run these by you and just share them. And she gives the Hebrew attribution to Shin, which is pronounced Sheen, which means
fire.
Or fang.
Right.
What's that?
Interesting.
Yeah. The astrological attribution we already discussed, fire, eternal flame of life force. And when we think of Pluto, Hades, right away it's the way that we're programmed. We just think dark is bad. It's this whole thing and it's not.
It's my head. Humans.
It's duality. It's just duality. It's a 31st path which mediates between Had, the thinking mind, and Malkuth, the material world or the physical body. So she put it on a 31st path.
Interesting.
Its essence is resurrection in God consciousness, the circle of the eternal flame, and its intelligence is perpetual intelligence. The flame of the one life is eternal. So the mystery is freedom from judgment, accompanies the liberation of personal consciousness. Freedom from judgment accompanies the liberation of personal consciousness, is exactly what you were talking about. Cessation in one form is transition to another. Resurrection is the return journey home for all three layers of consciousness: the subconscious, the dark, the waking conscious, and the higher consciousness, the light. The supreme realization is that there is no death, only evolution of form, and return to the great fire from whence all things emanate. That's exactly what you're talking about, right?
Why fear death?
Yeah.
The big saying,
right.
Well, in the Immortality key, that, the old Greek saying that used to be famous and well known is, he who dies before he dies does not die when he dies.
Oh, man. That's pretty cool. It also, if you look at the tarot, you can look at the death card 13, which is Scorpio.
Of course.
There's transformation, ending, closure, regeneration, down to the bare bones. We see this skeleton on a white horse. It's basically the caterpillar in a cocoon on the verge of becoming a butterfly. That's where I was at today. And again, coming out the other side in the meaning of this particular transit, but I thought that was profound. And the Judgment card, the planet Pluto, which Smith-White calls the card not resurrection, he calls it judgment. I like what, I'm going to see the title of this here, Tarot and Astrology by Corinne Kenner has to say, so I just want to read this paragraph for a minute. And it says, Pluto might have been written off by scientists, but astrologers and tarot readers never say die. The planet of transformation is a key player in contemporary astrology, and its role in tarot is equally established. Pluto is a planet of death and destruction, ominous sounding words that are softened by their presentation in the Judgment card. Most versions of the card depict people who are in the act of being judged. In the Wizard's Tarot, the card features a group of students taking their final exams. Because tarot readers read ahead, we know that in the end the student will pass the test. They will be left standing and free to go on to the next chapter of their lives. Pluto and the Judgment card both teach that endings are merely part of a cycle of resurrection and rebirth, and inevitably lead to a second chance at a new life. In astrology, Pluto symbolizes death, resurrection, forgiveness, and release, and that is something that we didn't talk a lot about tonight, was forgiveness and release. And there isn't any way that one can move forward and take the pain and turn it into honed power to then be used as alchemy on a daily basis if we don't, I think, forgive. And sometimes these pains are so grave and so deep and so wounding from others or whatever has occurred that it's very, very challenging to forgive, but there is no release without forgiveness. And forgiveness, doesn't mean you have to like the person, doesn't mean you have to like what happened, but there's an energetic exchange here when you hold on to these lower vibrations, which lack of forgiveness is one of them, bitterness. There's a text in the Bible that says, bitterness is as rottenness in your bones. It's a proverb. And it just doesn't allow your body and its systems to operate the way that it needs to when you've got all this inside of you. And it will make you sick. And I can attest to this. I've talked about this earlier, but a while ago, I was really upset about something. It's been a while, but I ended up in the hospital because I'm a cancer, and everything is in the stomach for us. The stomach and the breast, and it can be very challenging. And I've learned now, don't do that. It's, that was one of my Plutonian lessons. Don't let yourself get like that. Manage your life, and I've since done that. Doesn't mean the hard days like today don't come, but it was only because of forgiveness and release and allowing people just to have their path. Like, people are not going to like you sometimes. It has to not matter. You know, have your tribe, have your friendships. You got to have some people that are your home team. You can't do this alone. I believe that no man's an island. I believe the Wheel of Fortune card comes after the Hermit for a reason. You can't stay the Hermit. Got to come on out. Got to start socializing and release and let go. And I tell you, there's nothing like a full moon to do those, because the power is potent and it's there for you. And, you know, just write their name down, put it in a bowl with some beautiful herbs and flowers and other things that will burn up, and just say, I release you, and say what it was you're releasing. Say, I release you, and let it burn up and transmute, and the ashes fly away to then go from you. Never to be put back again. You can never have it, because it's broken down and it's been transmuted and it's turned into something else. And this is something that I had to learn as a heavy water signature woman, feminine, coming in also, you know, not to hold and to feel so much. Empaths have a really hard time with this, that have been wounded, because it goes so deep that you can get lost in that.
Right.
So,
well, if you get too good at that, I mean, sometimes you can end up being cold, or seeming cold at least, because when you're someone that feels so much and is so sensitive, one of the things you have to learn is not to give your care to everything that tugs at your heart. I mean, a part of a skill you have to learn, if you're that type of Cancer emotional person, is how not to care about certain things. I mean, even though it's against your nature, I mean, it's just something you need to do for survival.
this is absolutely true, and I call that, you know, aura management, right?
Mm-hmm.
Aura management, and we're not taught that. We're barely finding out what the heck's going on here with all this stuff coming out. Maybe some of you are more privileged. I certainly wasn't, to have been raised. And kudos to the moms out there, and raising their daughters, and the fathers out there raising their daughters and sons, and just teaching them these ways, and showing them how to hold ceremony, and showing them how to know themselves, and looking at their charts and finding out who they really are, and causing them to be nurtured and grown into what they're supposed to be.
Oh, yeah.
Got off topic there, but
that's okay. We're at the end anyway.
Yeah. One last thing I wanted to bring in here before I go. It's out of the Starman Tarot. I highly recommend this deck. And it's the Judgment card. And it says the theme that he writes, and by the way, this is David DeAngelis and Esther DeAngelis, Starman Tarot. I think this deck took him 20 years to make. It's phenomenal. Worth every penny. I am vibrantly alive and live into the God-Goddess that I am. That's the theme of his card. Heeding the call of a higher purpose. See, this resurrection, this judgment, it's because there's a higher call. Like, we can't go where we need to go, and how we need to be creative and express ourselves on the planet. We can't do that if we're not resurrected from some of these things. The rebirth of a new personality. Forgive yourself and others. So the theme came through again in another book. Be the visionary you were made to be. And the reverse of that is not acting with clear thought, being too cautious. Think about your personal patterns of judging and blame. Harness your energy for something which sustains you. Harness your energy for something which sustains you. And there is a meditation I'd like to close with and read before we sign off. And this is from Tarot of the Spirit, Pamela Eakins, PhD. But I won't read it unless you have something else you'd like to bring in.
No, please.
Right, close? Okay, now I'll close us out. So thanks for joining us. And this is a meditation for Pluto and the Resurrection card. And so if any of this resonated with you, pull out that Resurrection card out of your decks, and you can think about this meditation. Seeing all, the totality, moving to a new aeon on all 5 planes, the actions, the feelings, the mind, the flesh, and that 5th dimension which transcends the rest, the life force, the spirit of spirits, in which 10,000 things rejoice, in which 10,000 things return. This is resurrection. Judgments were wrought, self and culture weighed, subtracted, divided, and multiplied, leaving one with that reverent feeling of having done it all, having seen it all, having known it all, having said it all, having lived it all, having done the process, and having learned only that one knows less than one knew at the start. One hovers in the new aeon, free of form, in proximity to the divine, the last vestiges of worldly life being that of self-knowledge and personal consciousness, about to be cast aside to make room for complete ascent. Soon the breaching dolphins of new life will stay upon the surface, for the move is fast, the gestation complete, the limitations of form torn asunder, the false personality, its speculation and separation, it's ripped to shreds by the fang of the serpent of transformation, and in no time at all, the breaching dolphins of new life dance forever on the surface. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Yay.